Durdle magic. Thank you for tuning in to Durdle Magic. Please subscribe and hit that notification bell if you like the content you see here today, and leave a like and share the video with someone you might think is interested. Leaving those likes really helps us out, but another way to help us out is by using our TCG Player affiliate link below. If you're looking for singles, sealed product, or gaming accessories, please consider using our link to support the channel. We also have some playmats at inkgaming.com. Go ahead and hit the link in the description to check those out. Alright, let's grab some spells and Durdle with some magic. Hello and welcome back to Durdle Magic. Today we have the deck tech for Colfenor Enchantments. There were a lot of people that I ran into online that said they were hoping for an enchantment commander, and while we did get Gen, that's not really my style of play, and I really wanted one, so I decided to use Colfenor since it was the commander we got, and since there have been things such as enchantment creatures. So let's dive into what we're going to be covering today. For this deck in particular, let's go over the following sections. Because it's an enchantments themed deck, we need Enchantress Effects, which are basically you do something with an enchantment, you get to draw a card. Constellation from some of the Theros cards. Fill the graveyard so we can recur stuff, and then of course Recursion. And then how we plan to achieve victory and or the combo in the deck. Okay, let's get to what basically fuels our deck, the Enchantress Effects. Almost all of these will be on creatures. There are some that will be on enchantments, and then we also have other enchantments and other abilities that help us draw a card. But first, let's cover the actual enchantresses. So first up, we have Satyr Enchanter and Enchantress's Presence. Both of them say whenever you cast an enchantment spell, draw a card. Next up, we have where enchantresses get their name, Verduran Enchantress and Mesa Enchantress, with also both say, whenever you cast an enchantment, draw a card. Even though the Verduran one says play, it's essentially the same thing. But as opposed to the last four, we then have Setessan Champion and Eidolon of Blossoms, which both have Constellation, so when enchantment enters the battlefield, you draw a card. Setessan Champion also gets bigger for every time this happens. This is going to be a problem when we go into the combo, but I'll explain that later. As far as non-Enchantress effects go, we have Phyrexian Arena, and if you don't want to use that, Underworld Connections. Sometimes not being able to pay that life is good for the deck. Nyla Keen-Eyed and Erebos Bleak-Hearted both provide like quasi-card draw from Nyla anyway. Erebos we can use to sacrifice our creatures and get them in the graveyard, weaken another creature, and pay 2 life every time a creature dies separately to draw a card. And our creatures tend to want to die at least some of the time, so that's also a good backup card draw. And then after a lot of testing, Azoni Thousand-Eyed back into the deck, because not only does it provide some bodies on the board in itself as a body, it can also help us sacrifice our creatures again, but this time we gain 1 life and draw a card. So it's kind of like the reverse of Erebos, and the extra card draw is just good. Next up we have Constellation. 2 of our card drawing effects use this ability, but we also have some other cards in the deck that are really important to our game plan. Only 4 other cards though, so this will be a short section. Our Constellation cards include Grim Guardian, Doomwake Giant, Agent of Erebos, and Archon of Sun's Grace. So the Grim Guardian will bleed our opponents for 1 life each time an enchantment comes into play. Doomwake will weaken their creatures by -1/-1. Agent of Erebos will exile graveyards for us, and the Archon of Sun's Grace will give us 2/2 Flying Pegasus, and as long as the Archon is in play, they will also have lifelink. So we can create a wide board, get rid of a lot of our opponent's creatures, keep their graveyards under control, and potentially bleed them out. Of course, this can all tie into the combo later, which again we'll go over towards the end of the video. The next section for the deck tech is Fill the Graveyard, because we're going to need to put stuff into there to recur with our commander and various other spells and or abilities. So let's see what we buried and what we can find. Up first we have our sacrifice outlets, which consist of Viscera Seer, Yahenni Undying Partisan, Dimir House Guard, and Vish Kal Blood Arbiter. These are all very good because they each give us some kind of benefit. So for Viscera Seer, it lets us scry, and if we can do that infinitely, we can scry basically to any card we want, being a quasi-tutor of sorts. Yahenni makes itself indestructible, which makes it a good blocker, and it gets larger for each opponent's creature that dies. Halstemere Guard regenerates itself, but it also has Transmute, so it also acts like a tutor for CMC4. And Vishkal itself is part of the infinite combo as well, but it can also take down an entire board of creatures as long as they don't Shroud or Hexproof, and can hit for infinite damage with Lifelink, which can be very good. The other two creatures and/or enchantments here are Nyx Weaver and Death's Oasis, an enchantment I've wanted to use for a really long time myself. What happens here is Nyx Weaver will mill us 2 cards during our upkeep, and then we can pay 1 black-green, exile this card, and return anything from our graveyard to our hand, which is very good. And then we have Death's Oasis, which is kind of like another half of Colfenor, in that when a creature we control dies, we mill 2 cards, but then we get a creature back from our graveyard to our hand that has a lesser converted mana cost. So while it's mana cost and not toughness, it's kind of the same thing. We can then also pay 1 and sacrifice this enchantment to gain life equal to the greatest converted mana cost among creatures we control, which is really secondary, but over the course of testing the deck, life gain is necessary. So now we just need to get all that stuff back, and that's where our Recursion comes in, both for creatures and enchantments. So let's go ahead and take a look at those cards. First up, we have the ever-impressive Sun Titan, which can get back permanents of CMC3 or less, which includes enchantments, so very useful here. Phyrexian Reclamation, 1 black, pay 2 life, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, which can be, of course, an enchantment creature. Omen of the Dead, it returns a creature card from your graveyard to your hand when it comes into play, but then we can also sacrifice it later to scry 2. Plus, it has Flash, can be very useful. Frika's Mender, creature or enchantment from your graveyard to your hand, and then Auramancer and Monk Idealist, which only deal with enchantments from your graveyard to your hand. The reason, of course, for most of our stuff going back to our hand is because of our commander, so we can recast a bunch of stuff, especially with our enchantments in Constellation. But there are some enchantments that will bring our creatures right back to the battlefield. Those enchantments would happen to be Animate Dead, Necromancy, and Dance of the Dead. Due to budget limitations I impose on my own deck building for the series and the channel, I didn't include these, although Animate Dead has come down in price due to some more recent reprints anyway. So Animate Dead could be useful, but Necromancy and Dance of the Dead are older cards, harder to find, and they are more expensive. But what each of them has in common is they are enchantments and auras, when they transform into auras anyway, because these cards are a bit older, that can bring a creature straight from your graveyard back onto the battlefield with this aura attached to them. Necromancy has the upside of being able to cast it at instant speed, but then the creature is sacrificed at the end of the turn. Of course, if we just want to bring everything back all at once, or at least a multitude of things, there are cards like Nethroi Apex of Death and Eerie Ultimatum. Nethroi in particular, if it mutates, can bring back any number of creatures as long as the power total of them is 10 or less to the battlefield, and because a lot of our guys have a higher toughness than our power, we're getting a good deal here. Otherwise, there's Eerie Ultimatum, which brings back any number of permanent cards with different names from our graveyard to the battlefield. Hey, we're playing Commander, and hey, enchantments are permanents. Just imagine the kind of triggers you can get off a card like that. And finally, we turn all this value into victory, and we have some combos in the deck to help us get a victory if we can't just grind out that value. So let's start going over those, and I'll go over a little bit of some extra cards you can add to the deck if you want to do some other things too. Some cards that will help us close out the game start with Avenger of Zendikar, an army in a can, and if we can recur it and recast it, that's just more plants to help us swarm our opponents. Some other cards are Martyr's Bond and Dictate of Erebos. If our creatures are going to be sacrificed and die anyway, we might as well get our opponents to sacrifice their creatures as well. Couple that with the enchantment Grave Betrayal, and those creatures can come join our side of the battle, and we can help close out a game that way. And of course, recur our creatures in the process. Another card I wanted to mention is Mana Bloom. For X and green, it comes into play with X charge counters on it, and you may remove 1 a turn to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, but what's important about it is once it has no more counters, it returns to your hand. So we can cast this every turn to trigger Constellation effects, and that can be very good. Next up, we have our infinite combo in the deck, which is a sack outlet, any of the enchantments Angelic Renewal, Unholy Indenture, or Chaos Ghost Form, and Sun Titan. Then we just need an outlet for all the triggers. So what happens here is we enchant Sun Titan with either Unholy Indenture or Chaos Ghost form, or just have Angelic Renewal on the battlefield, sacrifice Sun Titan to one of our sacrifice effects, and then we reap the rewards if it dying, coming back into play, returning the enchantment to play, and when it dies, the enchantment going to the graveyard. And this can trigger a multitude of things. My two favorite ways to close out with this combo are Vishkal Blood Arbiter, which also provides us a sack outlet and a way to wipe the board, plus it can deal infinite lifelinking damage, as I said before, or the Grim Guardian, which can just bleed our opponents dry. Not to mention Grim Guardian is also an enchantment, so it's going to be good throughout the rest of the deck. Another kind of combo you can have in Colfenor, as long as you have a commander on the battlefield, is having an Anthem type of effect out and having creatures you can cast for 0. That way they come into play and don't immediately die. Then you just need a sack outlet. You can sack 1 to recur the other. You will need 2. And then you just keep recasting them for 0. This gives you infinite ETBs, infinite death triggers, and infinite whatever else you need. Add in something like Blood Artist and the game can be yours. And last but not least, Siona, Captain of the Pyles and Shielded by Faith. This is an infinite combo where you enchant her with Shielded by Faith, she creates a 1/1 creature token, you move the Shielded by Faith onto that token, it becomes enchanted, triggering Siona again, and you go on forever and ever. Doesn't mill you out, and you can even get other aura cards if you happen to run a lot of auras. Notably, Unholy Indenture and Chaos Ghost form are also really good for this. That's it for this deck tech featuring Colfenor Enchantments. I hope you enjoyed this series featuring another Commander Legends commander, and if you want to check out the deck in more detail, there's a link into the description below. Also, let me know in the comments what you might do differently with the deck if you're doing enchantments with it, or conversely, it seems like a really flexible commander. It could be the enchantments, auras, artifacts, could even be modular or hydras if you really want to push it. I think Colfenor can be built in a number of different ways as long as you have enough creatures. Alright, that's it. See you on the next series for the channel, and stay safe out there.